background is I really started in the engineering field. I was fortunate enough to be an intern at NASA during Apollo and worked with the S1C stage, which is the first stage of the Saturn V, the stage and the engines, and then we worked through Skylab, and then I worked through the preliminary of the shuttle development. And got a little sidetracked on the engineering side and went more back toward the business side, but in the meantime I pursued my aviation career, and I've recently retired from Delta Airlines after 37 years, and best in my logbook, over 1,000 Atlantic crossings. And Skybolt was started with my mom and dad. I had just become a new hire airline pilot, and it just seemed like the normal thing for airline pilots to do is have a side business. And my dad and I put our heads together and we created a aircraft parts business, and it quickly evolved to focus more on fasteners. And then through that evolution, we began focusing more on manufacturing of panel fasteners, commonly call them cowling fasteners. It seemed like a huge void in the market, and basically that's been our true focus, is fasteners and the manufacturing of panel fasteners for the last 37 years. We specialize in quarter-turn quick-release fasteners, covering the more common and designs that come from about 4 different designs over the years, going back in the 1930s. And my passion has been primarily the camlock design is one of my favorites, and I've done approximately 17 patents on spin-offs from the basic 1940s vintage camlock design to make it more user-friendly, both in aerospace, but bring that fastener over into industrial markets, be it transportation, basic industrial, racing, all sorts of uses that were never really thought of because of the unique design, which we've changed enough to make it more, like I said, user-friendly to the mass market.
Kits. Tell me about the fastener kits.
Well, actually, that's really what got us into manufacturing, because through trade shows and interaction and hands-on, we determined that there were so many variations in general aviation aircraft engine cowlings that it would take a maintenance shop half a day just to try to document the various sizes, and sometimes on some airplanes there may be 3 or 4 different manufacturers represented just on the engine cowling alone. And I got the idea to, gosh, if I could get a parts manual for every airplane, I could go through the parts manual and develop unique kits. And I quickly found that when I did invest in that the parts manuals were maybe 30% correct, and the rest of it had to be made up by just simply going out on the flight line in my travels with the airlines. Anytime we'd have a short layover, I would be out on the flight line looking for small airplanes and documenting in my little black book the counts and the various type of fasteners that I observed, and then compare that back with the parts manual. And I developed these kits. It took me about 4 years to get a pretty much developed product line, and then from that it's just constant evolution with feedback from customers and new airplanes that I observed that we really didn't have a good documentation of, that we could perfect these into a kit, and it saves the maintenance shops an enormous amount of time of just trying to figure out, what is this, where do you buy it? All I need to know is what the serial number of the airplane is, and I know every part and piece in it that we developed in these kits. It's been very successful. It's one of our prized product lines, and it's just a continuous profit center for us, and we continue to develop that along with a lot of other things that we get involved in. We manufacture approximately 98% of everything we sell in the panel fastener line right here in Leesburg at this shop. We outsource some offshore, but very, very little offshore. Most of it we try to source U.S. domestic DFARS products, and 9 times out of 10, I can find better sources in the U.S. actually less expensive than offshore. It's not always the case, but most of the time I found that to be true, and that certainly helps our lead times and our expense side of the equation. Plus, it's kind of nice when you can, if you have an issue with a part, pick up the phone, call the provider, and discuss the issue and find out some resolves and a better way of making the part better to help us support our parts and make our parts better.
What's the future for Skybolt?
Well, there's a lot of things. We've diversified, as I mentioned, in several industries. Transportation and the defense industries excite me more than anything because there's more vehicles than airplanes typically. But the excitement part is our participation with some of the entrepreneurs in our space program. As I mentioned earlier, I cut my teeth with NASA during Apollo, and now I'm coming full circle. Skybolt will be on the first launch of Americans back in space early in 2019, and we're ginning up for a lot of excitement around here because we're heavily represented in that project, and so that's going to put us solidly back into the space program as a provider of specialty designs that we've come up with in conjunction with the manufacturers of the rockets and the space capsules. It's kind of fun working with the young engineers, especially when I tell them that, I once sat in a firing room with, a couple of times with Werner von Braun, and typically when you go to these plants, what's exciting about it is when you try to park is try not to wipe out 100 skateboards, because there's nobody works in these plants they're over 30 years old, and these guys, these young kids, their hair's on fire. They've taken the geek concept into outer space, and it's just really exciting to work with the young minds that are brilliant. Obviously, they've done things that back in my day we said you could never do that, and they've done it successfully, and we're part of that, and that's got our entire Skybolt team real excited for beginning of next year on that project. We also have projects on Army fighting vehicles. That's got us excited because there's a lot of them, and that puts us solidly in the defense program, and that should kick in 2019. That's a patented design that we did a few years back, and now it's starting to show a payback of being involved in the defense industry, which also excites me because there's so much that can be done to make our fighting vehicles safer and more efficient, and just in armor plating that we get involved in specialty fasteners for armor plating, and I could go on all day about what we can do in that arena. So that it keeps us excited.